Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of whatever the hell I'm calling this show. I guess I'm calling it Speedrunning Talkshow, or whatever the hell I titled the last one. As I said, weekly didn't happen, but that's fine because this week we are here with Emeralve. Hello, Mr. Emeralve.
Hello.
How we doing?
Relaxing. I'm chilling.
Nice and based. Have you played any Rack 2
Yeah,
today?
I have actually.
Oh,
I
nice.
got a
You
bit
find
tilted, but
find any spicy things that you didn't post? You keeping secret strats?
um, I was gonna like post my A1 com gold, but then Scotto took it. So
Ooh, unlucky, buddy. Got
yeah.
bopped by the Scotto. Alright, so care to just sort of tell the people, anyone who doesn't know, anyone who's living under a rock, what sort of crazy things you've achieved?
um, I have the size matters world record for no proxies. I got that like 2 years ago. I've kept it for over a year now, and then I changed to Rack 2. I have I have all the PS3 world records except for any percent. I'm trying to get that now. It's been the hardest one so far.
And having
Um,
to compete with Scotto at the same time as well, it's a big
yeah,
one.
it's been the hardest one.
Yeah.
I played other games, but that's whatever. I'm not good at them.
I mean, fair
um,
enough. I mean, you kind of said it how it is, which is you've got most of the PS3 records, all but one, which sort of leads greatly into the first question, which is a lot of what people might call the early part of what I would call a very high level speedrunning career, because you are a very high level player, of course. That's what it takes to have world records. Was a big part of it trying to, in the early days, before we knew the PS3 was quicker, of course, and you were playing NG Plus and no IMG, you played PS3 regardless. And was any of that sort of trying to just prove that it could be faster because you always believed it could be, or was it
um,
just enjoying the version?
I I always wanted a PS2, and if I had one, I wouldn't have done PS3. It was I didn't really plan to for it to go this far. It was more just for fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Did you try emulator in the early days? I feel like I remember you trying emulator.
I mean, I used to play emulator in like 2019, back,
Yeah.
every day. Not every day, but you know what I mean. I knew the PS2 stuff. I was good at it, but
Yeah.
never could get a PS2.
I mean, you had the real, as you say, the actual console for PS3, and it does
Yeah.
play better than, especially 2019 emulators, because they're a bit better now. They're still not perfect, but they
I mean,
certainly have a
I've
ways to
done
go.
tests too, with
Yeah,
PS2, so
of
I know what I'm
course.
doing.
Yeah, well, obviously you know how the tech works. Otherwise,
I
yeah,
hope
you wouldn't
so.
be able to do them. Do you reckon you'd ever do? You know how there's the Rack One task tool
Oh
for
yeah.
PS3? If that was made on PS3, would you do like a PS3 task?
Um, I don't know if it even supports for Act 2,
It
but
doesn't,
I
but
think
if it
I,
did,
I think I would give it a go. It's just I'd be more inclined to do an emulator because you don't have save states. It's
yeah.
a lot worse to use.
Have
I would.
you thought about, like, have you theorized what that route would be? Because obviously everyone knows what the PS2 route would be, a fuck ton of mid-air charges, but, like,
I
PS3, have you thought about it?
honestly have not. Uh, um, I've imagined using like a lot of the quick select tech, which is not really viable. Um, Getting rid of all camera clips, make them insta clips.
That's
Um,
true. Just speeding them up, making it more like PS2.
yeah, because at the end of the day, you want to emulate PS2 as much as you possibly can
Yeah.
because it's faster.
I remember thinking about this, like, 3 years ago. I had this epiphany. I was, like, the world record was still, like, 23 at this point, for context. And I remember somebody asked in chat, they were like, do you reckon PS3 level will be quicker? And I was like, it probably is right now, we just don't know it. And
Oh my god,
3 years later, it's true. And I was always like, we've got these ways to do things. They are just significantly harder on PS3. And then, of course, we found Dome Clip, and we found a way to do pause tech that was huge, discovered by you, I might add.
oh my god.
Oh my god. And of course, all the other stuff we kept on finding on PS3, and it just happened naturally. But it's true, because a Taz on PS3 would look pretty similar to PS2 RTA in a lot of
It
in a
would,
lot
yeah.
of ways. Obviously you wouldn't get the big mid-air charge chains because they just don't, to my knowledge, they don't exist.
I mean, you
Um,
can do, the budget one where like you throw the decoy and then charge out of that, but
I
you
thought you
lose
could
too
only do
much
that
height.
once, or can you keep on doing it in
I think you
theory?
can combine that, like to do it multiple times. I'm pretty sure.
Right, I genuinely didn't know that. I just learnt something.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me because I mean I've always been very interested in route, even if it's versions I don't play. I tend to try and think about what the routes would look like. If you were to do a PS3 Taz, what category actually interests you the most? Because obviously now you've got experience in all of them. Ignoring how long it would take, because obviously no one's going to say max percent, because that's a bloody huge category. But if you could just snap your fingers and have it done, which category would interest you the most?
Well, obviously, no IMG. I feel
Basic
like it's not even a
take.
question because any
Yes.
percent, I can just do like PS2, right?
Yeah.
Um, Also, not as interesting. Seen before.
Mm.
No IMG would just be so sick to me.
Yeah. Plus,
I don't really
any
have anything
percent would
else
not
to.
be
Oh,
different.
sorry. Exactly, but I don't really have much to like expand upon. I just think no IMG would be sick.
It really would be. I mean, I was always sort of thought the same thing. I think an APB Taz would be pretty cool. Because you can get some crazy clank chains these days.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I actually think in a Taz setting, there's a pretty okay chance that PS3 is faster. That's a
I have thought
theory I've
about
been
that.
looking at.
Yeah.
Hardest thing, of course, is just the ships. But in a Taz, you'd cheat the RNG so that you got Raritanium every time, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, which is a really weird thought. Actually, is there even enough to get nuke? Hold up, so how many do you kill on Whoopash? What, you kill 40?
Yeah.
Oh, but you do Whoopash skip. Oh, would you need to do it though? Now I'm getting interested. That's something I want to look at
No,
later.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, but for the route and max percent, I've been like debating if you should do whip patch skip or not, because
Interesting,
you
just
do
because the
need it.
Raritanium.
Yeah, it's limited.
What's
Um,
the solution in max percent right now if you did
you
do Whoopash
go,
skip?
go on and just keep grinding like you normally do.
Right.
Um, but you could either do whip hash, grind and go on for less, or do whip hash skip and then grind and go on for like 3 extra minutes.
Right, so you end up losing time because you have to grind for so
Maybe.
long.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, possibly, in theory.
Yeah.
Hmm. Very interesting. Now, that leads nicely into something I wanted to discuss. Would you
Oh,
say you are more interested in the route as a whole and you just sort of do the runs because it's an execution of the route, because you might as well, or you're more interested in actually completing the runs than routing?
uh, I think I just like to do the runs. Um, I feel like I'll be honest, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to routing.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
like like even NG Plus or PS3, it never really went anywhere because I didn't look into it. And then when Scotto and Pintali came to it, they like found all the time saves, the major ones.
Yeah, and then you just
Because I
played
was
it.
just happy doing the route. I don't really care.
That's fair enough.
Um,
I mean, I used to be sort of both. I would happily sit down. I had that like week when we rerouted NG Plus from like 836 down to like 80x territory in like a week. And every day for like 6 days straight, I did 8 hour streams of like strat hunting and practice.
well,
That
yeah,
was the time where I was more interested in the route. But then, like, especially in recent years, I've just been so lazy. I just don't care. Like, I have looked at
exactly.
the game so many times, and I realized that there's so little left for me personally to find because I've already looked at the game in as many different ways as I can. Right? I only have
Mm,
one set of eyes, and so I just don't care anymore. I'm the same. If like I don't play the games, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't booted up my PS2 in like 2 months because I used to just strat hunt and mess around and have a good time because, that was fun. But these days I have no new ideas. So if I'm not actually doing runs, I'm not playing the game. That's my
yeah,
little
I mean,
sad
makes sense.
admission.
I
Which is
mean,
why
and
oops, sorry.
oh, sorry. I was gonna say like before and after I stream, I don't even like find strats. I just practice or go run.
Do you still
But
practice before stream?
yeah, for like 30 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, nice. I used to be able to do like 3 hours of practice before stream. I used to wake up at like 8, and my rule would be I wasn't allowed to stream or do runs until midday. but I
Oh,
still wanted
okay.
to play the game, and so I'd just do like 4 hours of practice. And it was not. I'm not saying that's a good idea, I might add, because you've already
Yeah.
played so much. By the time you start doing runs, you're playing so badly because you're tired. But
No,
like,
okay. I know you're going, but I don't know if you saw the other day, March the 1st, I did a 9 hour any percent stream.
Jesus Christ, I think I remember like waking up and checking. I'm like,
Oh
oh, he's
God.
streaming, and then I checked when I got home from work. I'm like, he's still streaming.
Yeah.
It was wild.
And I didn't even PB. The next day I streamed for like 3 hours PB'd. I was so
It's
mad.
just funny like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I talked about it in the last episode. I actually think streaming, I mean, playing for too long straight is detrimental. Like
Yeah, I
I
lost
much
focus.
prefer I much prefer 2 hour session break, 2 hour session break. Like I rarely stream for longer than like 2 hours these days because I don't. Sometimes you're in the groove and you just go crazy, but
Yeah.
it's rare. Maybe that's just because I'm a lazy sod getting
I used to be
fucking
the
20
same,
now. So
like only like 2 hours, but I've lately like made it like 3 to 4.
is some of that
Um,
just you have more time now, or you have less
yeah, for
time and just care
sure.
more?
But I also think because all of my other grinds were never as tough, I never had an actual
Yeah.
like competitor.
Yeah.
Um, this time, yeah, it's been really hard, so I play for a lot longer.
Yeah, it's not a bunch of new strats on a realized faster
Exactly.
console. It's
Yeah,
having to compete with somebody who is already well, everyone would agree, has been the rack to any percent goat for like 3 years straight.
exactly. Yeah.
So like it's obviously going to be a lot harder. But for what it's worth, you've been doing very well. It's not easy to come into a new category and just keep up like that.
I mean, I've surprised myself too. I always
Yeah.
thought, like charge routes was my thing, but I'm glad I can do both.
How have you found the transition in terms of enjoyability?
Um, it's like the early game definitely isn't as fun, obviously, but once you get to no tack, I really enjoy it.
So no tack onwards for you, the category becomes really fun.
Yeah, really good.
That's
I
fair
mean,
enough.
as for most categories, if you do well, it's fun. I
Yeah,
think
well, yeah,
everyone
that's
can agree
true.
on that.
That's true.
But yeah,
Even I enjoy the APB early game when I do well. It's just rare that
exactly.
I do well. No, it's an interesting point. I do want to ask because you've found all of this success now. Obviously, you've come from Size Matters. You clearly didn't feel the need to stick with Size Matters. I
No.
don't know exactly why, and we might get into that a bit later. But you've come to Rack 2, and you finished with your initial categories, and then you went to the other categories, which you didn't, as you said, you were a charge boot guy. You didn't inherently have interest. And I remember asking you ages ago if you'd ever play any percent APB, and you were like, nah, because I'm a charge boot guy. And
Really?
then
Oh,
here we
okay.
are. Yeah, I could probably find the DMs. I won't, but I probably could. And yes, of course, here we are now. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel a sense of obligation to play the game, or is it just you've realized that you enjoy more facets of it than you expected?
Um, I feel like it is kind of both. Um, I don't really want to leave because I feel like I still have things to do. Um, I want to get sub 3 max percent,
So a bit of a
get all the world
perfectionist.
records. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of stuff I want to do, but at the same time, I really do enjoy it. Um,
Yeah.
which is why I've stuck to Rack 2 more than Ouya and like Deadlocked.
Because you
Um,
tried them and they weren't quite for you.
yeah. I planned to go to Deadlocked like right after 80%, but I just don't want to.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's fair enough. I mean, I've always joke about how I've had plans for. I've been saying I'll play Todd for 3 years, and I've barely done that. So, I mean, it just happens, right? You find your game and you just stick with it. What is it about Rack 2 for you? Because I realized recently that I couldn't actually say why I like Rack 2. Are you consciously aware of what makes Rack 2 so fun to you?
uh, gotta think about this. I think, God, I don't know. It's like, I think it's just most of it is most like enjoyment. Because you think of every game has this like planets you don't like.
Yeah.
You know, um, I think Rack 2 for me has like the best ratio of fun to not fun. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Has the
Um,
best flow and least sort of like
I think so.
time.
Because even like ship levels, a lot of people complain about that, but I enjoy it.
I'm the same. I
Even
like the
Clank.
ship levels. Yo, now
So
that
yeah,
is a good take with clank clips now. That's a good take.
so I don't really have much complaints about it. Whereas, example of Ouya, I run it, Marcadia, I want to sleep.
Yeah.
um, So yeah, I
I
think
mean, you
that's
hear
why.
that so often, right? You hear people going like, "Oh,
Exactly.
I love X game, but geez, I hate the 10 minutes of downtime here or whatever," right? And I've
Yeah.
often said this. I think Rack 2 has an incredible ratio. Like, if you look at no IMG, for example, especially now that we skip Whoopash, which was a lot of people's complaint level, and obviously we don't have nuke storage anymore. You look at it and it's like Aranos 1 into Oozla, into Jamming, into Maktar, into
Exactly.
Barlow. Now, some people don't like Barlow Race. I personally think it's really fun and a change
I
of
like it too,
pace.
I guess. Yeah.
Yes, Base Rack 2 player, let's
I think
go.
I think you really start to enjoy it when you do real strats, not just like
Yep.
yeah.
Most people who complain about it don't know how to do the race. That's just the real truth of it. I think most people that know how to 212 actually enjoy the race.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not like a criticism of people that don't play it either. Or like don't want to sit down and learn the race as much as I do want to throw shade at them right now. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the same as anything, right? I always say if you don't learn the game properly and the Barlow race is part of it, then you won't enjoy it to its full extent. I do think
Exactly.
the same of Marcadia, I will add. I started this last month where I played a little bit of Ouya. I enjoyed Marcadia a lot more after I really sat down and learned all of the itty bitty details and how to
Yeah,
do
that
it
makes
properly.
sense.
Because otherwise, you're sort of standing there like, shoot, 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 rather than actually having a real route that you're executing. Now, 2 minutes of downtime is 2 minutes of downtime, but even that has its positives, right? Like,
Yeah.
some of that is just,
And
mentality, but
I do feel like not bad, but because I did say earlier I don't really like the Ouya parts, but I'm not an Ouya runner, see.
yeah,
Um, so people who do run the game might disagree, which is
yeah,
fair.
exactly.
But
I'm pretty sure I've heard Zem go on record saying he really enjoys Marcadia.
which is
And
good.
that
I mean,
makes
I like
sense to me
that.
because if you're that good at a game, you've learned it to the best level, and you've probably enjoyed it from the start, right? The same way we say we like Barlow Race, people are gonna like Marcadia, and people are gonna like all of Deadlocked as a whole.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, because yeah, no, I think as a whole, all I'm really getting at is that when you learn the game properly and you don't skip any details, you don't skip the ship levels. A lot of people don't learn Gorn properly, for example. You
Yeah.
don't skip the race. You don't skip that 2 seconds of return movement back to the ship here or there, like etc. You have so much more fun because it makes the route feel really complete if you've actually sat down and learnt every single thing that you're doing. Like, it's one of the
Yeah,
most
to
ways.
be fair, some like levels where I don't learn it. I don't know if you get this, but I kind of feel like guilty.
Yes,
Because yeah,
yes.
yeah, you just haven't done it properly.
I
But
felt that within Daco when I was playing APB before I learned it. I was playing it and I just felt sick because I was like, oh, I haven't put the
exactly,
right amount
man.
of work in for this.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, no.
Gorn for me in 90% was like the toughest one for me to learn.
It's a hard
I'm
split.
still not good at it, but once you learn it, it's no problem.
Yeah, you don't
Um,
die to it anymore.
I did today actually. Um,
Ooh,
oh, was it
cringe.
today? I think so. Yeah.
He's outing himself right now.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. He sucks at any percent.
Yeah, I do.
You're not meant to agree. You're meant to say, fuck you,
No,
Fear.
I mean, yeah, right. I'm good.
All right. Well, I guess I'll lead that into the next question then. Because I feel like we had a great response there. Yeah, I would credit you for having a good mentality in speedrunning. I don't know if you would agree. I obviously don't know what's going on inside your head when you're playing, but I would describe you as someone who, sure, you get frustrated, you let it out, but then you move on. You don't dwell on it, right? You don't go like, "Oh, this fucking game," and then end the stream.
Yeah.
All right? Like,
Um. Wait. Do you want to continue yours or?
yeah, I'll just finish the question, then you'll
All
probably
right.
be able to answer it. So I basically wanted to ask you, do you think since you started speedrunning, have you always had that sort of good mentality, or is it something you've had to put work into learning, maybe from, I don't know if you play a sport or do anything, other hobbies, right?
Mm,
And that you've adapted some skills from there, or if it's just something that, yeah, you've always had. Like, what are
I
your thoughts on
don't.
that?
I would always get very, very frustrated when playing size matters.
Right.
And I like to think if I was to go back to that now, I wouldn't. So it's something I haven't really trained myself, and I didn't really get it from somewhere. I just kind of like over time, I think I just was able to cope a lot better.
Yeah,
Um,
okay. So just like sort of learning by exposure.
Yeah, and especially because you realize that more angry you are, the worse you play, and
Well, for
that's a
real, yeah.
fact. Um,
That's just the best realization you can learn in anything,
yeah.
any
So a lot of
competitive
times
player.
you just gotta stay calm, and a lot of times I spam in my chat. People think I'm angry. Most of the time, I'm not even angry.
Well,
Um,
that's the thing. As I said, like I think it's healthy to let it out, right? Like people talk about saying nothing and that meaning you're calm. I disagree, right? I think I do so much better when I just let it out. I go, oh, fucking Matt Tor or something stupid.
yeah,
And then I just move on because I've said it. I've expressed my frustration. I'm not thinking about it now. I'm not dwelling on it. So I can move on. Whereas I know, I'm not going to name them, but I have a friend who I know when they run, they try the whole don't say anything tactic, and then they randomly blow up after like an hour because they've just been bottling up all the frustration, right?
yeah,
And I think that's a pretty common trend. I also think that obviously now, at least as an outsider, it looks to me like you enjoy Rack 2 more than Size Matters. Would that be a accurate assumption?
I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think playing a game you enjoy more, you're gonna have more fun. It's gonna be harder to tilt you, so obviously that's gonna help as well. But I mean,
definitely.
like as you said, I think once you've learnt that the skills in keeping a good mental, you pretty much can keep it anyway, right?
And I
Like,
really think that even if you get angry, you just got to realize that you still have your goal, and just don't dwell on it, which is
yeah,
what you said
exactly.
before.
One really interesting thing which I found is speedrunning, learning how to control that, especially on runs where you're on pace, right? There is nothing quite like that pressure of performing that final difficult trick in the run, right? Whether it's the last midair charge or triple long jump or, whatever it is, right? Or,
Yeah,
Yeetle clip or YOLO pet, whatever it is. Like, you could think of a million examples, right? Whatever it is, there's nothing quite like that pressure. And I found once I learned how to deal with that pressure in speedrunning, I just got better at dealing with pressure in general. Like I've always used speedrunning as like sort of a coping mechanism. Not saying that's a good idea, it's just something I've always done. And one thing, I was going through my final exams of school when I was doing, I think it was my 22 grind. I think I just finished the 22 grind, or I'd just done like some record, and then I went through them. And I'd never found any exams easier than my final exams simply
mm,
because I had learnt how to use that from speedrunning. I also found that I got better at controlling my emotions on the tennis court, and I just became a calmer person in general. Like, would you
that's pretty
say,
cool actually.
yeah, I think it's pretty common. So this very long question, I wanted to lead it into you. Do you feel that your speedrunning, whether it be your mentality or even, I don't know, your ability to just think quickly and chain a lot of inputs quickly, has any sort of skill you've learned from speedrunning helped you elsewhere, whether it be like another hobby or anywhere in life?
I don't really think skill. Well, I know when you say skill, do you mean like mentality or? Yeah,
Mentality could be a skill because I think that is a skill, yeah, or it
because I
could
like
be
to
anything.
think that has improved, the last 2 years. Not really anything else, to be honest, from what I can tell. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough. I mean, some people, I've asked other people this question. Some people have said their lives were changed from speedrunning, and other people have said they got worse. So I mean,
Worse.
yeah. Like, oh look, I've talked to a lot of people. All right.
All right, jeez, all right.
Nah, not no one really says speedrunning's made their life worth. That's a bit of a stretch, but um, uh, nah, I won't get into it. But but anyway, back onto that sort of topic of obligation to Ratchet 2. I know that when I was grinding the categories, for example, no IMG, that's obviously my baby. I've always played no IMG. And I always felt that because nobody else really wanted to play Rack 2 at the highest level, and I have literally got quotes from some of the other top level runners just saying they don't want to play what PS2 top level became, right?
Mm,
So despite the changing route, right? Because obviously sometimes a route changes, and that is not always a positive thing. Sometimes you don't like it. Obviously, Whoopash skip for like NG plus categories is a no-brainer. Everyone likes it. But say instead of Whoopash skip, we had already Whoopash skip, and it was the opposite. It saved time to do Whoopash. Like a negative change like that. Have you
Okay.
ever experienced something like that where it's made you sort of want to take a step back from the category?
Um, Door 3 skip, especially on PS3, is very tough.
In
Um,
NG Plus specifically?
yeah, NG Plus, because by the time I did any percent, I was good at it. But in NG Plus, it's like, the second split, it just, it's a barrier. I
Yep.
would get like 3 runs out a day after, multiple hours, kind of like
Yep.
Clank Proxy for you, a
Oh
few years
yeah,
ago.
that was awful.
Um, I think that's definitely like the first example I can think of. It was awful.
I think it's hard to express to people just how like difficult it is to
Yeah,
run a category like that. As you said, I did
and
it with Clank Proxy. I had
yeah,
this one stream. I played for 3 hours, and I got out of Aranos once. Like,
exactly. And I think that's happened to me too from Door
yeah,
3. It's I'm very happy I finally learnt it properly, but okay, something that is really hard for me is people ask me like, how do I do Door 3? Can you give me tips? And I don't know how to answer that. I really
mm.
don't.
I think
It's just
sometimes people
trial and
don't
error.
people don't
You
always
go.
understand that once you've done something a lot of times, you can't explain how to do it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly how I
I
feel.
have gotten obviously a lot better at double charging since I made those how to double charge videos in like 2019. And people ask me, they're like, you were already good at them then. What did you change to get better at them? And I'm like, I couldn't tell you. Like, it just, you do it a bunch and eventually something clicks and you don't necessarily know what it is. And that for me is really hard to come to terms with because I
Yeah.
want to help people. Like, when they ask me, how do I do, like, last time I played, um, no IMG, right? I
Mm,
didn't miss a single Clank proxy for sorry, not Clank proxy, Clank clip for 5 days.
nice.
Like, I just did not miss them, right? And then of course there are people that are missing 5 Clank proxies a minute, not proxies, clips, sorry, right? And those people are like, how do you do it so consistently? And it's like, other than the actual technique of how to do it that I've showed you, I can't. It really upsets me that I can't help them do it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not everything can be taught, and I kind of dislike that
Yeah.
because there's multiple examples to it. Poking as well. I,
Yes.
I don't know. How do I teach that? But
Yeah.
it just comes from trial and error and keep going. You'll get
Mm.
it. That's all I can say. And I feel bad because I'm leaving them like on a not a closed note, open. I don't know.
Yeah. Without an answer.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
It's like when people go, "Hey, I'm failing X. Any tips?" And it's like, well, there's no one tip to help any one trick get done, right?
Yeah,
Depends on what's going wrong. There might be obvious things like you're not actually doing the technique correct. But if you're doing the technique 99% correct and you're not quite getting it, that last percentage is the hardest bit to get because it's just practicing and you gaining an understanding. And it's so minute that usually nobody can help you with it once it's a high enough level trick. Like, there's
but
nothing
then
no one
there's
else can do.
skips like shop clip. Everyone, not everyone, most people know how to do it, but no one is consistent.
Yep.
Um, and that I don't know how to teach that either. People have asked me how to do that. Um,
It just sort of misses sometimes. You
yeah,
just don't always get it.
and that's what have to. I want them to learn that. Um, so yeah,
It's one of those things where I also think it's more common with newer speedrunners. They come in and they're like, "Oh, well, clearly if you're getting a world record, you got every trick. You must get it pretty much first try almost every run." Right? And I think people don't understand that that 20,000 attempts number means something, right? Because
yeah,
tricks don't always just work. There frequently is a level of acceptance of just it won't. And I know it, like, literally last episode of this fucking show I was talking about a zero acceptance of failure, but there is a range or some certain tricks where it just doesn't work sometimes, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. Like whether it be a tiniest bit of camera RNG. Great example for this is PS2, the new Oozler exterior, right? Where you clip at the corner and then you do the decoy
You
jump to
know,
hit the.
that's been a thing for like a year now. It's not really new.
That's true. Don't even. Oh, bro,
Anyway,
don't make me feel old. Oh God.
just had to tell you
Sorry.
real quick.
The
Anyway,
ancient exterior for
oh,
Oozler,
thank you.
right?
Yeah,
But the point is, right? Because of that clip, even though it's technically Taz controllable, for their human, it's not controllable. Because if you're a pixel extra up, then what the camera does is completely different. So
yeah,
the solution there is accept that sometimes runs just don't get past that despite it being otherwise perfect. And that is a hard concept for I think a lot of new speedrunners to grasp. And that really is the reason that I think new speedrunners should stay away from strats like that. It's not because they can't execute them. It's because it's really hard to learn to accept that things just don't always work in speedrunning, especially RNG things. Like, it's just not going to work. Raritanium
mm.
RNG is another great example.
And there's just some skips as well where you got to like think, okay, how long will it take for me to get good at, and how
Yep.
much does it save? And you have
Yep.
to realize if it's worth. So yeah.
Historically, we always had nuke storage, obviously not anymore, but we always had nuke storage, and so often people were asking for advice on that. I mean, you saw how much people asked for advice on nuke storage. It was every
Yeah.
third day a new player was like, how do I do it? And it's like, well, it's exactly what it looks like. You pause on the frame. But how many humans can pause on the exact frame when there is a plus or minus frame variance because of lag? Answer, nobody. It doesn't happen. But, oh well. I mean, I think we've made the point pretty clear, but yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'll lead into another question. Very different topic, actually.
Okay.
So obviously I spoke to Mobius last week, and Mobius has been running this game for a long time, or the games a long time before I did in the Ratchet community. By the time I then came into the Ratchet community, he was already an old head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I played the game for several years, and then you came into the community. I, to my knowledge, was already a world record holder by the time you joined the
Yeah,
community,
you were.
right? So, I guess the question is, how does it feel to join a community that is essentially pre-established, right? Is it intimidating to try and say, yes, I want to climb the ranks and get X a good time, or is it something that you sort of just played and didn't really think about it?
Um, I think the second one because I never really came into it thinking, oh, I'm gonna get world record because that was so far out of my reach.
Yep.
Everyone who was at the top seemed, like they were gods at the game. I could not imagine being that good. Um, it was only until like, I get into top 10 or whatever, and it starts to cross my mind like,
Yep.
what if I can do that?
Yeah,
So
because you get within that arm's reach, and you're just like, can I do it? Can I
yeah,
really?
exactly. And I think if there's new people, joining a speedrunning community, I don't think they should all, go saying to themselves, I want world record. I think
Yep.
it's cool to think that, and it's a good long-term goal, but I don't know.
I think it's
I
also
think,
inherently toxic because A, you're saying that you think in less time you can achieve more than the people that are already there,
yeah,
and that is a dangerous mindset to the point where it's almost self-fulfilling. Like, it's not just confident, it's like bad and harmful to yourself, because it makes you expect results rather than being okay with whatever. Like, I think there is
yeah,
so
exactly.
much healthy growth from joining a community and going, hey, this game's cool, I enjoy it, so I'm just going to play it, right? And setting yourself small goals along the way and meeting those goals and getting the gratification of those goals
And I
without
think
having these
that,
outlandish expectations.
yeah, and I think that is, what I followed when I was playing Rack 1 and Deadlocked. I'm not world record level, I'm good at them, but I'm just happy with my times, top 10 or whatever I got.
Yep.
No, Rack 1, I'm like top 50 or something. I don't know, but I think that's what people should do, just get a time they're happy with.
Yeah.
That's it.
And if you get a time you're happy with and other people aren't, well, screw them.
Yeah,
Speedrunning
exactly.
is an individual sport. Yes, that's a way to put it. How about, okay, so not as you join the community. That's pretty much what I suspected, because I remember at one point commenting to you, I was like, you remind me so much of myself. I feel like you're gonna be a really good speedrunner. I don't know if you
I
remember that
remember that.
conversation.
I remember that. I think that was in your no specials run.
Oh, it might be actually, yeah. I have to
Yeah.
go back and look at it. Because I remember, like, seeing you join the community and thinking, wow, this guy's really good. Because, to be honest, you improved really quickly.
I surprised myself with that too.
I mean, within a year, you went from basically rookie to top level. So that's hard to do. And I feel
Mm.
like that deserves more attention. Because a lot of people don't quite realize. I think because you joined, like, late in a year, so you couldn't technically be rookie, and people always look at the rack awards, so they didn't realize
No,
you were a
I
rookie.
got
But
rookie 2021.
did you?
No, 2022. I joined February 2021.
I
And
swear I
I
looked
got
back
it
at the awards and I was
then.
like, he joined November. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. I don't
Maybe.
know. There's been a lot of rookies. Point is,
Well, I
though,
mean,
that's
I
my
did.
point. You join February and you become this
Yeah.
crazy running. You get sack records, and then you jump to rack 2 and you get rack 2 records.
Did you
Like,
just say sack?
not sack. Oh, God, not sack. Size matters. Much better game.
Yes, yes.
Size matters I could see myself playing, but sack makes me want to die, bro.
Good.
But no, how about okay? So you didn't feel pressure joining, which again I pretty much knew already because you're not a toxic individual, but
I hope not.
you're not. Don't worry. Um, but how about once you started, as you said, you got into that top 10 range. At what point did you maybe start feeling pressure? Because I know when I started to get into that range, as you said, and at the time I was competing then with Zem and Scotto, and same as what you said, I'm like, these are the big names that I've always looked up to. How do I possibly overcome them? Right? So
Mm.
at what point did you start sort of feeling that pressure, and how did it feel to you, and what did it look like to you?
I think for me it was harder because the world records that I'd gotten, were very like slow, no good strats. But I think size matters. I can think of an example where like Musa, I will name a name Musa. He ended up telling me like, you've got real potential and you're really good. I didn't have world record yet. And it was after I got a com gold. I think then I suppose, because then someone finally believed I could do it.
Mm.
So then I just kept pushing, I guess.
Yeah,
I
as
think it's
much as you
hard
believe
to,
in yourself, it's hard
yeah,
until someone believes in you, right?
exactly, yeah. And I think that was finally like validation, I suppose,
Yeah.
um, that I could do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So to you, was it like, did it add pressure that you were trying to, for example, in size matters, you were trying to bop that same person who had faith in you? Did that add an
Musa didn't
element?
actually have world record, but
Did he not at the time? I swear he
it
did.
was Fran's score.
Oh, that's right. Oh, dude.
Yeah,
Size matters history has a whole turn in it that I always forget about.
yeah.
What about okay, Iraq 2 then? How about that? Because obviously the console wars
Hmm.
become a part of that. Did the console wars take away from that a bit, or did it sort of add to that pressure, or because of size matters, were you already used to it?
Well, I don't know if it added or like subtracted from it, but I have another example of NG Plus. I remember, I used to have PS3 world record, and then Scotto came along, beat it by like over a minute, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I wasn't as good as I thought I'd be. Um, so everyone cheered him on. I kind of felt left out in a way because I used to
Right.
be like the king, and then he got it. I think I had a bit of pressure trying to get it back because it was finally again someone who's really good at the game.
Mm.
It took a lot. I did use new strats, but it was still hard.
So you think there's
um,
definitely that added element of pressure simply because, I mean, to put it bluntly, Scotto is a very well respected name. I
yeah,
mean, he was at the top when I was trying to get record, and then you're a much more recent runner in the community than I am, and he's still a name at the top, right? So there's a
mm.
level of prestige there that feels difficult to overcome, right?
And I think yeah, because people knew me back then when I had like my 8 minute time as like the best PS3 player. I wanted to live up to that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, when it got taken away,
You started to get that external pressure, and then when it goes, it's like you're losing a part of yourself.
yeah. And then when I get it back again, I feel good. But
I mean, that is the cycle of speedrunning, isn't it?
yeah.
It's like, I got it back. Fuck you all. I'm better at the game.
Well, all right.
No, so it's interesting because at the same time, of course, that PS3, PS2 war was happening. I hate calling it a war because I really wish people would just accept both versions, but that's, I think, the best term to describe it. People wanted it to be a war, and so they blew it
Yeah.
out of proportion. Um, Now, one thing that I often battled with, this is why I often ask people about that obligation. It's something that intrigues me a lot. Because I know when I was grinding out no IMG, NG Plus, they were my favorite categories by a long shot, right? And I
Mm,
felt that if I didn't play at the highest level, nobody else would, right? And
yeah.
so, and I touched on this earlier, I felt the need to keep playing and keep on ensuring the world record was entirely up to date and to make sure it was as good as possible because at first, because I loved it, I enjoyed it. And I'm not saying I don't love and enjoy it now, but it reached a point where there was certainly a big motivation where, as you said, that expectation from outside comes in and people are like, oh, he's that no IMG guy, right? And
Mm,
so it was like, this new strat comes out. I can't remember what strat it was. Oh, no, I do. I was going for 21. I hadn't played for like a week, right? And no-tac death abuse was found. And within like 20 minutes, I was at work. I hadn't even gotten home. And within 20 minutes, I had DMs from like 5 people being like, yo, when are you coming back to make sure it's optimized and stuff? And I'm
wow.
just
Okay.
like, that is. And I don't mean that as like, what are they doing? They were being supportive, right?
Yeah.
I think that people don't recognize that support in a certain way can also become, you know, pressure because support means people want you to succeed. And when you've got more people than just yourself to let down, that's a whole other pressure. And that's the
No,
thing
I
that's
do
made
get
me
that a
struggle the
lot,
most.
especially when I stream. I get a lot of people being supportive of me, which is awesome, and I appreciate it. But whenever I end stream on like a low note, no PB, I feel really bad.
Yeah,
Um, it's a
because you feel
problem I
that you've
have,
let the
but
stream down as well.
yeah, I get yeah,
Especially
because
because when streaming comes into it, it becomes more than just the run. It becomes these people that are coming to watch and support you and talk to you, and it becomes a community of people that want you to succeed, right?
yeah, which is why I tend to like feel more comfortable doing offline runs. But at the same time, I don't like offline runs. It's like yeah, there's both sides to it.
I mean, every coin has two sides, right? As you say,
Mm,
but I was the same. When I did my 21 grind, I don't think I would have gotten through it without offline runs because I loved the community and the support, but as I said, that support can also become pressure. So there was like a week at one point. I think I got a record offline in my 21 grind. Maybe it was a 22 grind. I don't remember, but um I remember I'd been struggling on stream for a few weeks and I wanted to be able to sit down and just play until I didn't want to anymore without the pressure, right? Because as soon as you hit that start stream button, right?
mm.
You, at least I found that I felt an obligation to then suddenly be a streamer as well. And it's like, okay, I need to at least go for like 2 hours here, right?
Yeah,
Whereas you do
and
offline runs, it's like, okay, half an hour, I'm bored, I'm done.
exactly. And even if I have a longer session offline, I can still take breaks more often and just
Exactly.
relax a bit. Um, and yeah, it just takes a lot more energy when you're properly streaming. I'm not even a streamer, really. I don't use mic. I just chat in
Mm.
chat. But
Even
I
then, you
think the
still
same goes
build
for
your own
that.
community.
Yeah, and I get a lot of people in my, every day. Yeah. So
Do
I don't
you
really
do you
know.
find that have you ever experienced that thing where you're sort of going through a run, you're maybe pretty far through it, and you realize that you're not overly attached to it, be it because of an early 20-second mistake or something, or whatever the reason may be. For some reason, you're just not overly attached to it. And you realize that, for example, chat or the community is more attached to that specific run than you are.
Yeah, I get that actually. There's a few runs like I've had die very late into the run, and honestly, I didn't even care that much. I didn't like the run, and then my whole chat was, like spamming like sad emotes or whatever, or like get
Yeah.
really sad. It's like, oh, you'll get it next time, and it's awesome. I love when people do that, but at the same time, I kind of just didn't care about that.
Mm.
So yeah, I have.
Yeah, that's that level of. Obviously, that's support. Like, you cannot construe
Yeah,
that. I need to be
exactly.
careful with how I say this, right? That is obviously support. And I'm not
And
trying to say it's
yeah,
not.
I've had to say like I do appreciate it multiple times here because I do, but yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, but that run, I didn't actually care really. I had the
Yeah.
same thing. I had when I was going for 20, I had like 320 paces in a row that I didn't give a fuck about. And everybody else was going crazy in chat, and I'm just like, I just don't really care. Like, it's just, especially because once you're in that grind, you are experiencing it more than anyone else. Obviously, you're the player, right?
Mm,
And it's going to feel the most real to you. But by the same token, you're going to be the most desensitized. And I think that is a real point of it. The viewer, same as, a sports fan might be more attached to a match than, I don't know, one of the players in some contexts. Like if the team's already made it to the finals or something, right, and they don't actually need to win, right, then the
mm.
fan might care more than the player.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
think that occurs here as well, in that, oh well, I can just go again, right? But
Yeah.
like, especially because a lot of speedrunning, for better or worse, has become so intertwined with like YouTube and video social media culture, like Twitch and whatever, that I think so many of the impacts on speedrunning are external, which is unique for something which should be so individual.
And it's kind of irrelevant to what you're saying, but it does feel very odd to play offline because a lot of it is, about like being there for everyone to watch and uploading your
Yeah.
runs and it being live.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah.
I feel like I'm screwing people over when I'm not streaming, right? Especially
Yeah.
when the money starts to come into it. There was a small time period where I was getting a bit of, financial support through it when I needed it. Um, and I feel like I always felt like I cannot do offline runs because if I am, doing runs offline, then what am I really worth on stream, sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
And
it kind
that's
of
a whole other
it
can
kind
of
of just
worms.
feels like you're wasting potential,
Yeah.
money. Yeah,
Not so much in the money for me. It's not that it like was something I wanted to make money. It
I
was
see.
more that if they're giving me money, that is like
Yeah.
because they
No,
feel that it's worth
exactly.
it and I'm like
And
stealing that from them.
a lot of people to me who have subbed, most of the time I stream every day. So when I don't, I feel like I feel bad because they're wasting, one of the 30 days on no stream.
Yeah.
Um, so I do feel like I have to live up to an expectation to keep
Yeah.
succeeding and keep running when people do that. So
I still battle out with that. Like I don't stream anymore. Like I don't ever, right?
yeah,
Like I for lack of a better term, I have pretty much dropped off the face of the speedrunning world. And that is not because I don't want to anymore, but with my job, the way it has been and how my life has gone, I just haven't really had time. And so when I do stream for like 3 days in a row and people sub, I almost feel guilty because I'm like, man, you're supporting me and I appreciate it so much, obviously. But I know full well there's a good chance I'm not going to stream again for another 2 weeks. So I
yeah,
feel
and
wrong like taking that money. I've considered actually disabling affiliate because I haven't been streaming enough.
I need those channel points, man.
I
I
can't
have
stand the
300,000.
channel point system. Oh,
um, no, I feel the same way, but in a different situation, kinda, or like different, you know what I mean? Because I don't use mic, and I don't know how to thank people enough.
mm,
What's saying thank you in chat meant to mean? It's not very personal.
yeah.
Um,
But
People
then
do
if
it
you say
anyway.
too much, it feels fake.
Exactly, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't really know how to do it, but people, they're nice. They're all accepting.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially, I think the
but
Ratchet community is
yeah,
also specifically very nice as a whole.
yeah, for
Like,
sure.
they're not going to be mad at you. Like, you could not thank them and they'd still keep on subbing. I'm
Yeah,
still, obviously, you do because that's the fucking decent thing to do. But, like, that's what I mean. They're such nice people, right?
yeah.
Like,
I
yeah.
even felt bad because I didn't have alerts on for a bit. I have added them now, but I see the things. I'm not a fan of alerts, but at the same time, I want people to feel like they're appreciated. So
Yeah. They deserve something for helping to support you,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Especially if that is going towards something. One way I used to deal with that is because I got to a point where I felt like I was earning enough that I could then improve my setup, right? My speedrunning setup. Like,
Mm.
my retro tink was entirely paid for through stream. Like, I've been pretty public about that. And my new capture card, for example, right? So, I do like to spend the money that I get to support me through stream back on it when I can, right? Because I just
Mm.
think that's, they're paying to say, hey, cool, content or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. I will use that to improve it. But at the same time, then I feel guilty because I turned on my PS2 the other day and I'm using this, retro tink and crazy retro
All
spy
right.
setup that people paid for. And I'm just like, and I don't stream anymore.
Yeah, I've been wanting to like, buy a microphone 'cause I'm using a headset right now.
Ah,
Um,
it sounds fine.
but I have like kind of the same feeling as you there.
Hmm.
Um, especially because it's a lot of money for one thing.
Exactly.
I feel like people might, think it went to waste when
Yeah.
in reality it didn't. But yeah,
And then there's the other side of it where it's like, some people will care, some people don't. And in reality, a lot of the people, like it, in reality, we're overthinking it. Most of the people supporting you
yeah,
monetarily for speedrunning, it's like they just like you and your content and they just don't care where it goes. But at the same time, it still feels like I'm almost stealing. And I am ever grateful, right? This is not me trying to like afterwards complain and be like, oh, I don't deserve these things. It's not like that sort of guilt. It's more of a like, it's more that I wish I could give back more. I wish I had
yeah,
time to be streaming still, even if I wasn't getting records. If I was just doing some attempts for fun, like how Deo, he's not always doing record attempts. He's just like doing runs, right? Like every day. Deo Man, the Spyro runner, of course. And I could totally see myself doing that, but I like don't have time, and that is the source of the guilt because it's just sitting there, right? My retro tink literally is a dusty mess. It's sitting
oh no.
there with a layer of dust that I haven't cleaned because I'm lazy and it sits
I
behind my
mean,
computer.
I feel like I'm. That's not really what's happening with me, but I feel like I
I mean,
get
you
some
still
sort of
stream, so
pressure. Well, yeah, okay. Because I want if I run a game that isn't Rack 2, I'm worried people won't watch because
yeah,
that's what they came here for. That's what they spend
yeah.
money on. So I do get a bit of pressure to stay on the one game. I do like it, and I will stay on it regardless. But
Hmm.
yeah,
I totally
do you
feel that.
like?
Like I
Yeah,
enjoyed Terraria streams, but I felt like I was robbing people of that Ratchet 2 stream time that they wanted. And I eventually just stopped streaming anything other than like Ratchet runs because it's not what I built the community around and it's not what people want to see. So it's more like I don't want to waste their time almost.
yeah, exactly. That's how I feel.
Because if I respect one thing more than anything, it's the time of the people who have supported me. I can support them by, well, streaming would be a great start, but but no. Anyway, I guess we'll lead into the next topic because I'm getting way too depressed talking about this.
Okay.
Um, but back to that sort of established community question. The other side of it, right? Obviously, there's the pressure of it, but there's the other side of it. How did it feel to sort of transition from being one of those, rookie runner to
Mm.
becoming somebody that sometimes it feels like it can happen overnight, right? Suddenly you become somebody that people respect and they go to you for the opinion and on if something should be done and all that. Like, how did that transition feel for you?
I don't know how to answer that because to me it didn't really feel like a transition. Um,
It
sometimes I
just
still feel like a
happened eventually.
rookie, but
Interesting. Really?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I
So
think
you still don't
hmm,
think of yourself, like when you think of your speedrunning, you don't think, oh, my world records, like I am a record holder. You still think, oh, I'm sort of a
hmm.
rookie.
It's a bit of a hard one. Because to me, the only records I'm like properly proud of are NG plus and max percent. Um, because the rest were just new strats, very easy, not that much effort. But I don't know.
I mean, the 647 is a ridiculously good run.
Yeah, I'm very happy with
I
that.
don't know enough about max percent to comment, but
Wait,
like
oh, right, yeah.
647 NG plus is
Yeah.
a ridiculously good run. So in my head, for what it's worth, I already had you up with, you know, the best runners in the community. So it's interesting for me to hear that you don't necessarily think of yourself that way. But
I
I
think it's
also
a very
get that.
like I think it's a very like imposter syndrome me type of feeling.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
was
do
thinking that.
like I think, if Scotto would have come back to NG plus, I would be gone. I really feel like that. But I think maybe I do feel a lot better because I'm able to put up a fight in any percent, right? I
Mm.
can compete. I don't know.
One thing, I used to suffer or deal with imposter syndrome sort of symptoms a lot. I always used to think like, oh, if Scotto came back to no IMG right now, he'd beat my time,
Yeah.
right? I thought that for many years. And then at one point I sort of just thought about it and I was like, well, at one point I was like, well, actually they won't. And that's a really weird realization that I hope you have someday, but another way I thought about it as well was like, usually the person who wins, right? If you're not playing a category at the moment, then of course somebody who comes back is going to beat your time. They're not
Yeah.
competing with a moving goalpost. They've got a static benchmark, and as time progresses, speedrunning standards get better, right? So
Mm.
one weird thought I have is as a world record sits in one place, it compared to the community slowly gets worse because the standard that the community has progressed to is on average a bit better, and at the highest level is a little bit better, right? So you
Mm.
might find you come back to NG plus. It's like, sure, if Scotto came back to NG plus, would he beat your run? Maybe, but at the same time, if you went back to NG plus, would you beat your run? Well, yeah.
Right. I see. Yeah.
Like you sort of get what I mean. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
I realize that, and I'm like, realistically, if you're not pushing that run further, of course they're gonna beat it, right? And now I'm not claiming to be a psychologist or anything, but like for me that was really helpful when I realized that like sure they would, but that's because the highest level is just the highest level, right?
And
And
sorry,
feel
I
free
really
feel
think
free to
like
inject.
what like helps me a lot, which I think is healthy, is like I think about what can he do that I can't, right? He's a good player, but so am I. He does this,
Exactly.
so do I. Like I can still do it. I just need time. I think that helps me really.
Yeah. For me, that was one of the reasons when I play, and I always tell people, I think the com golds are such a good resource. It makes me really sad to see a lot of top level runners these days sort of disregard the com golds as a concept. Because I think they're really helpful. What I used to do when I was up and coming as a speedrunner is I would just look at the com golds and I was like, okay, if I'm having some imposter syndrome, I just look at a com gold I don't have and I practice that until I feel at the highest level, right?
Yeah.
Now, years on, the only com gold I don't have is gone, and that's because my game fucking crashed when I actually did beat it.
Well, you did remember. Apparently, you can now hold circle to shoot the missiles. Um.
That's true, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. No, I mean neither did I, but I think I use that too with the com golds. Um, Scott has a lot, and he
Mm,
like some splits he's like 20 seconds faster than me, and I like, how am I competing if I'm that much slower? So I think that is very useful.
mm.
However, then there's some splits that like vary, any percent splits where like bolt and XP
Yeah, it was
changes.
just RNG.
I think that is a bit iffy, but
Mm.
mostly it works.
And that's the problem with like any percent com golds, and I get that. But I still think that's such a useful tool, and I always use it that way. Obviously, as an NG plus runner, I'm very pure numbers, and RNG isn't a thing,
Yeah.
so like that's always going to be my take. But yeah, no, it's like one of my biggest pieces of advice to people. If your community has like a com gold sheet with footage, just pick a split and practice and try and realize what things they're doing quicker than you, right? Like just try and get better at it. And that's really all there is to it, right?
Mm.
And interestingly enough for me is what I realize is one of the sources of that sort of feeling for me, that imposter syndrome type of feeling, is I got to a point where I had 75% of the com golds. My sum of bests were like 20 seconds lower than Scotto's, and he still bopped me. Which is a sort of weird feeling because it's like, in theory, I should be faster, and yet I'm just not. Um, and that was a really hard thing for me to deal with. And of course, I've dealt with that, and I realized that it's because I was, let's put it this way, not very consistent.
No, I feel that too. I'll butt in real quick. Um, when I used to run it like size matters, I had most of the com golds. I had my record, and then Musa comes back after like a week. He would beat me by like 30 seconds, and
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know how I feel. I kind of feel hurt, right? Because everyone was cheering me on, and then boom, it's gone. Because
Mm,
and I
it
had
can
the com
happen so
golds too,
quick.
but yeah, because I think that's like kind of a like reality check where you realize, okay, he is actually better than me, and I
Mm.
never realized. Um, so
And
yeah,
sometimes that's okay, right? Like, because people just get better at speedrunning, right? Like, it's very hard to know. It's an impossible question to answer. If X person came back, would they be as godly as they were relative to the composition back then,
mm,
or are they going to struggle, right? Like, I mean, just to throw a name out there, right? Like, I often ask, like, hey, if Zem came back, would he be as unbeatably good as he was in the 25 era? Or would he struggle? And obviously, that's a question with no answer. The only way we ever get an answer is please Zem when you come back to the category.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's the only way it happens, right? So it's one of those infinite just mental traps that you get into as a speedrunner where you're thinking about something. It's almost like you're trying to convince yourself you don't deserve a record. Like
Yeah,
I always was guilty of that. I was trying to convince myself my record wasn't worth like, the praise, right? Like I know when I got
I feel
like
like I feel that a little bit too with some of mine because I got record on some categories with like 100 attempts, right?
yeah,
And that just feels like I cheated it. But
it
I
feels like
mean,
you haven't given it a proper go, but
yeah,
sometimes you just are better.
I mean, I feel I like hate accepting that because I feel, you know, rude. But I
That's the
guess a
thing,
fact is a
right? That's where
fact.
it comes back to the whole obligation question. Like, it's like, were you playing the category to get world record, or were you playing the category to optimize the time? Now, occasionally you come back, like, my greatest example of this one is came back to no IMG and I got the 20 in, what was it, 13 days of trying? Like, shortest no IMG grind I've ever had for the hardest time I ever had to get, right?
Yeah,
So sometimes things just click and it does just happen. It doesn't mean you haven't put the effort in. It's just, you know, a shock. It just happens. But that is such an easy way to fall into that imposter syndrome of, well, I only played 2 weeks, so I didn't really try, did I? Right?
yeah, I feel that. Even in no IMG, when I finally made PS3 faster, I'm not happy with that run. But it doesn't feel like a real record because I got it very quickly, then moved on.
Right.
Um, so obligation. Right? I feel like I should come back to that.
Mm.
Make it a real world record in quotations. Um, but yeah,
So I'll go back on PS2 and beat it on PS2 to force you to come back.
yeah, good.
I got you, don't worry.
It's possible.
I actually do intend to at some point, but
Yeah, cool.
it's gonna be very fucking hard, and I realize that it's sort of a null thing, which leads into another great topic. Um, how I know that we've discussed it in the past, obviously, to actually make the decision as a community to do the board split, but how do you feel about the categories being split, you personally?
To me, I never really cared that much. I was very much like pro board split. I wanted that, but if it didn't happen, I didn't really care because
Mm,
I would just be comparing my, goal to whatever I wanted my goal to be. Or if I
yeah.
didn't have world record, just compare it to, of the world record on my console. Um,
Mm,
is I like the leaderboards and I check them, but I don't think they should like change what I play or how I think.
Which is a very
Um,
pure mindset towards it.
yeah,
Which,
to me
interestingly
it just
enough, was
doesn't
an
matter.
argument people made against it. I won't name them, but I know there
That
were
can go
players
both
that were like,
ways. Yeah,
exactly, because they're like, well, you can just look at the boards and you compare against that record anyway.
yeah.
Um, for anyone who doesn't know, the main reason we did actually split them is because we wanted to be able to highlight both routes because they're so unique. Especially any percent, right? PS2 any percent is an unexplored thing that I should touch at some point that really has the potential to be very, very unique to PS3. And PS2 versus PS3 no IMG is so unique. And APB is so unique. Like, they're all such different categories. Biggest example, actually, max percent PS2 versus PS3. So unique. Um, and I like them both being highlighted because I could see myself at some point when I have time jumping on PS3 and learning this whole new route and in really enjoying the experience of climbing up the leaderboard. Because inherently, people love the leaderboard climb, and one of the biggest things that has always been a problem for slower consoles, like it always happened to PS3 runners and PAL runners, right?
Mm.
Where they'd play and they'd improve their time like a minute and they wouldn't move up the leaderboard because
Yeah,
it had PS2 runs as well, and they were
and
just
I
so
feel
much at an
like
advantage.
even though I just said before, the leaderboards don't matter, I think it's very good to have that like attention, I suppose. Like
Exactly.
I when I had my it wasn't world record back then, but my NG Plus world record, I was still like top 10 or something. That didn't feel very good. Um, even though I kind of was like, yeah, I got world record. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's not the same.
Like you were
Um,
this was pre Bolden Dome clip, right?
this
And
was like when
you
I had
had
my
like top 10.
824, so
Yeah.
that was a bit ago now.
Yeah, I
Uh,
forget what the route was. But I get what you mean, right? Because I had the same thing
yeah,
years ago when I did PS3. Obviously, it was a much different beast then, where I enjoyed the push, but the simple fact of the matter was that there was not much motivation to push it,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Whereas now that they're split, there is like a motivation to push it, and no matter if the version is slower, people will still be pushing it, right? They'll
And
still
which
be
is
looking for
why
ways to optimize it.
when people tried to run, PBSBR on PS3, I felt, I should come back and just get it. Not come back. I never played it, but um, it's worth playing now. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's it's really unique. It's
Mm.
awesome.
Because I know you played PBSPI PS3 for a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
did one run,
Yeah.
got world record.
And you were like
I'm that
routing
cool.
things.
No,
He's
I just
that
took it out.
good.
Yeah, one
No,
attempt beat it by like 20 minutes.
yeah, no, and that's exactly the point. Like we split it so that both can get highlighted because they're so different and they both still get looked into.
Yeah.
Because a great point that one of the leaderboard mods who I won't name raised in the discussion when we were having it initially was they said, how much sooner would we have realized that PS3 was actually faster if there was this motivation for people to play it? And that's a really interesting question to me because I thought about it and I was like, man, if the boards were split when I initially had the interest and went over, I probably would have pushed a lot harder.
Yeah.
And I would have gotten it down to that like 25 range when no IMG record was like, 24.
And
Because it always had that potential to be top 10 or top
and what I've
5.
always been curious about is no one's wanted to switch still, and it's been ages.
Mm,
People always, say PS3 sucks, and so I wonder if it were optimal years ago, how many people would be, on
mm.
PS3?
Though I should say, looking at the boards right now, there's like a brand new runner who's just made top 3 in no IMG on PS3.
There's a lot actually, but I guess
But no,
aside
you're
from
right.
them, not many people take it seriously, which I,
Mm,
I kind of hate. I feel like I'm the only one that takes it seriously,
mm.
but
What do
I
you
do
think I
remember.
felt
I
about no
think,
IMG as a whole for
yeah, you
years,
talked
mate?
about that too. Um,
It's hard. I think
yeah,
the hard thing you got to realize about that is that NG Plus and no IMG, in a lot of senses, are quite similar to no QE. A lot of people try it at a low level and don't want to push it very far because it is so intimidatingly
yeah,
difficult.
I've noticed that a lot.
Like, there's a lot of just runs, right? There is a lot of runs of NG Plus. Like, if I go NG Plus HD collection, there is 35 players, right? And then I look at PS2, obviously that was the optimal version for years, so 88, right? That's
Mm.
a lot of people who have played it, but so many of those are people that tried it and then were like, this is just too hard. and just stopped. Because realistically, the Ratchet games are very hard, and that's why that sort of outside pressure is such an interesting topic, because so many people watch these runs and so many people are too scared to do them.
I've always been not weirded out, but like I question why. Because out of all these people, I wonder why I decided to stick around. Because I was in the same boat as them, right? I saw the run,
Mm.
I thought it was cool, wanted to give it a go, but yeah, I wonder why I just stuck around and got good.
I
But
think it takes a certain type of mentality. I mean, we've already touched on the fact that you're at least mildly perfectionistic, which I think is a very, very common, I would almost go as far as saying required trait to be a speedrunner. Because if you
yeah,
don't have that inherent need to make your time a little bit better, then you're not going to have the interest in speedrunning from the get go, right? Like you'll learn the run because it's interesting how the game is played, and then you've learned the run and you've done like 2 or 3 runs, and you're like, okay, cool. It's no
mhm.
different to having just played through a game, right?
Yeah, I think people treat it like that, which is fine, I guess. But
Yeah, I'm not dissing that. I just think anyone that sticks around, and I would call a speedrunner, quote unquote, are just people that are inherently perfectionistic and want to push it that little bit further,
mm,
because they have always felt the need to. Like, before speedrunning, I've always been somebody who was quite efficient. I always liked doing things efficiently. Like, if I could, like, this is the best way I can describe it. If I'm going to leave my room, I think about the several things I have to do when I leave my room, and I very quickly come up with the most efficient way to do that. Like a lot of people I know just leave their room, they do a thing, do the next thing, do the next thing, go back, whatever, right? But when I do anything, I have a very quickly made plan of the best way to do it,
well, I think that's
right?
good, and it sounds silly, right? It's kind of like a route in
It
real.
sounds silly, it's just like the
Yeah,
way my brain works, right?
I mean, you can't complain, and that's very good.
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm so naturally geared towards speedrunning. But whereas there are a lot of people, as I said, who just like sort of go with the flow, and I would say that those are very rarely speedrunners. I can't think of a single speedrunner right now who just sort of lives life that way, goes with the flow, and just sort of chills out. Because I don't think that type of person tends to be interested in the hobby,
Mm.
which is not a criticism, it's just the observation of the types of, sadistic lunatics that are attracted to this hobby.
Yeah, many speedrunners have very similar mentalities,
Yeah.
so yeah, I can feel like see that being a thing.
Mm. And a lot of speedrunners, as I touched on last time, are have quite a few negative tendencies. There's been a big trend in the speedrunning scene. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but there's been a big trend to try and encourage more positive practices in terms of like how it's done. Because there is like, I think it all was kickstarted by, there was like this video essay posted like
Mm.
6 months ago or something, and it was talking about the damage of speedrunning or something, and it got a couple
Never
of
seen
million
it.
views. I remember watching it. I'd have to find it again, and there's been a whole bunch. There's been this weird trend of like, you know, um, politicians and political figures using speedrunning as an example of like degeneracy and stuff,
Wow,
which
okay.
even though it's really stupid, is it still makes people think, right? And I think
Mm.
that's why it's been such a hot topic. So I guess my question to you is what, not necessarily about yourself, but what are the negative tendencies or aspects of speedrunning that you have noticed?
Uh, a lot of people are just very negative to themselves. Like, really, people blame the game. I think that's fine if that's what you use to cope. But then there's other people
Coping.
that say like, I think there's a lot of people that say like, they suck, they're worthless. That's
Mm,
happened multiple times, and I don't like that because
I hate it.
everyone makes mistakes, right? But
Mm.
I don't think you should hate yourself for it, and people get very tilted over it. I
The
think.
same as everything, right? Like just
Yeah.
because you fucked up at something doesn't, change your worth. And yet for some reason, I think I don't think this is just a speedrunning culture thing. I think this is just anything competitive. There is a very perpetuated notion that if something is competitive, when people are driving for it, if you fail, you are a failure rather than just, the same as everybody else who didn't
Yeah,
quite achieve it,
and I
right?
think if you were to blame the game, I think people should do that honestly, right? Because it's not a human. Blame the game all you want, doesn't matter.
That's
But I think,
interesting. I don't actually know if I agree on that one
I mean,
because
I always thought the opposite. I kind of thought of it just then, but I think if you're gonna play the game anyway because you still enjoy it, I don't think there's harm in blaming the
mm,
game.
like your point is to take the negativity away from yourself and put it on something which won't be, affected. The
Yeah,
game's
because
not gonna
a lot of the
cry.
time, yeah, exactly, it's not human. But I think when people do it to themselves, they make them just perform worse and they feel
Mm.
worse. I don't think that's good.
See, I like that train of thought. The only reason I say I disagree is because I think people use it as not a coping mechanism, but an excuse. Now that's more
Mm.
towards the performance in speedrunning. In terms of the mental, like,
I can see both. Yeah,
yeah. Like, I feel like the best solution that everyone should strive for is just letting out the frustration, but not letting it become more than that. There is a big difference between, God damn it, I failed the run, I'm mad, and God damn it, I failed the run, I am a failure. That is a very different thing, and I have seen so many speedrunners and gamers in their grinds, whether it's like a plat trophy grind or like, a sub 20 grind, whatever it may be. I've seen them, their health get worse, their mental health. And it's
yeah,
because they're just berating themselves. I've seen it in tennis as well. I've coached players, because obviously that's my profession. I've coached players who are just berating themselves. And I'm just like, chill, calm down. Things happen, you fail, and you need, and I mean this very seriously to everybody listening, you need to have a more healthy coping mechanism than putting it on yourself. That is what I want to encourage people to do. If you're blaming yourself or letting yourself get affected by your hobby, maybe take a step back and try and fix that. And if you need convincing, it'll make you a better speedrunner.
and I wouldn't really say it's satisfying,
It's
but it's
certainly
something
not.
like kind of similar to that, right? Where once you are angry and then you get over it, it does feel nice to not be so
Mm,
bothered by it.
exactly.
I think it's very nice because sometimes I'll get, angry, reset
We
the
all
run,
do.
I'm good again, you know. I
Yeah.
think it's very good. And you feel good after that too.
Mm. You feel like
I
you've
think people should
overcome
learn.
something.
Yeah, and naturally you feel good overcoming things. I think
Mm.
people should, strive to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a more healthy way.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we've talked about the negatives, much more happy topic. What about the exact flip of that question? What are the really great things that you've seen in speedrunning, in not like in terms of achievements, but in terms of either mentality or community effort and stuff like that, that really just, makes you happy?
Oh wow. That's a hard one. I really just think um naturally just like having a goal and overcoming it and then being proud.
Mm,
I That's the only really one I can think of, but it's
it's a
the
great
most
feeling.
like apparent thing about speedrunning. Yeah, because everyone who plays, they all have a goal in mind.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, once you achieve it, no matter how long it takes or how hard it was, I think it's just always nice. I don't really
I
know what else to add to that.
I totally agree. It's such a nice feeling just because it's, a game. I think it's so hard to explain this hobby to people who aren't gamers. It took me years to sort of get this across to my parents. Because we often talked about it because when they realized I was making money off of this hobby I'd had for a few years, they were just like, what the fuck? Like, why? And they didn't understand it. And so we've had a lot of conversations about it and they really struggle to get their head around it. And to me, it's not just the feeling of, hey, I've achieved a goal. It's what we talked about before, where both the pressure of the community, but also that crazy support from the community, where not just you, but everybody who comes into your chat and is keeping up with your records and your PBs, everybody who wants you to succeed. And I remember the most this has ever culminated was when I did finally get 22. I think the hardest run for me to ever get was the 22. I remember just the sense of relief. Like, I I got this run that I had not PB'd in 9 months, right?
Wow. Okay.
9 months. I'd given up in the middle of that. I'd not played for a little bit because it was just so hard, right? And then I'd come back, and despite having some time off, everyone was even more supportive, right? They wanted to see it, and I wanted it so bad. And then I finally got it, and it was just like a weight off my shoulders. It's not just like, I've achieved this thing, I'm so great. It's like I almost felt like I was letting go of something. It was kind of sad in a good way, because I was like, I've done this now, right? To grind something for 9 months, there's a big feeling of what do you do next? And it's the same, and the way I equate this is to people who have, they've been working a job for many years. Say they're a scientist, right?
Mm.
And they've been working on an experiment for 5 years. It's the reason that experiment is why they wanted to get into whatever field they're in. And then they get their results, and it was a success, and they proved whatever they proved. It's like, where do you go next?
Yeah.
And it's such, obviously it's a bit of a sad thing, it's a hard thing, but I really want to highlight just how positive that is. Like, that's how much it means to people, right? You get so fulfilled, and you spend so much time working towards it, and everybody is excited for it. It's like, imagine succeeding something, right? Imagine you did something good at work, and then 100 people or 150 people congratulate you, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, it is such a good feeling, and I think that, to me, is the highlight. Another way I always think about it, God, I'm talking like a fucking
No, I
crazy
feel
man
like
right now.
it's very one-sided, but a lot of times I don't know what to say, so
That's
it's fine.
fair. You might relate more to this next one I'm going to mention, in that
All right.
I, to sort of express to people how good overcoming the struggle feels. When I got the 751, that is probably to this day the best speedrun I've ever done relative to the time, right? I
Mm.
didn't use the mid-air charge because at the time that was sort of a thing I was, experimenting with, but it wasn't a thing that I used every run. And so, to some of best, which at that time were hyper optimized for the strats I was using, it was less than a second per minute off some of bests for the strats used, right?
Wow. Okay.
And when I got that run, which, as I said, is the best I've ever done, I remember when I realized it was happening, when I hadn't missed poking and I was killing the protopet, everything went numb. I was struggling to speak. I had pins and needles in my lips. My arms were numb. My legs had pins and needles, not from like sitting down like a
Yeah.
dum
Yeah.
dum, but from just like my body literally going into a state of shock.
And I
The
think,
same sort of state of shock people get in car crashes and whatever from just such,
yeah.
you know,
Um, and
craziness.
I really think it's interesting for such a short category because you're feeling fine, and then next second you're going crazy,
Mm,
and then there's categories like max percent or longer ones in general where you get that feeling like an hour before the final time,
mm,
and that whole time you have to learn to control yourself for
yeah,
a lot longer. And I think it's a different experience,
very
but
different.
the same at the same time. So yeah.
It's one of the reasons I cite for why I find no IMG more interesting than NG Plus, because especially these days, now that the NG Plus route is just the end of no IMG, because it's so optimized, no matter the mid-air charges, you still do all three.
Mm.
Like, now that that is the case, it's, you have to get to that point on a crazy run. You've already done so much. And then your brain goes, I still have an entire NG Plus run to go. And that is the
Yeah, yeah.
most pressure you can ever feel, and yet at the same time, so calming. Like, when I was doing the 20 grind, in that 20, when I did actually get it, I felt relieved because I had done so much NG Plus. I got to Bolden, and in that run, I remember thinking, okay, cool, I can't fail this now. I still had 3 mid-air charges to go. And in my brain, I was like, I can't fail this because it
Yeah,
is
and you
just
think to
so
yourself
good.
like, you go thinking, okay, I've done this before. I've
Mm,
gotten 80 plus world records. What's different now?
mm.
Um, and I think, yeah, that just helps you to play the best still.
I think there's like a feeling. Sometimes you just have you ever had this feeling where you just know you're going to PB?
Yeah, but sometimes it doesn't, PV.
Well, that's interesting because I've I've only had it once. The only time I've ever felt it was in that 20. But by the time, as I said, by the time I reached Bolden, I was dead certain that I was PBing with that run. There was not a
Mm.
thought in my mind that anything could go wrong. That's why I got Karma. Like, if I had a heart rate monitor on, I think you would have seen my heart rate go
That's
down
interesting, actually.
reaching Bolden. I've never had that feeling before, and I've never had it since, probably because I've barely speedrun since, but
I mean, I really think that most people obviously get it, where it's like, what if it world records? And
yeah.
then that's when your heart rate, goes crazy.
Mm.
Because then you're just thinking about like a big one for me is what will people say after I get this? How many
Yeah.
GGs will I get? I know it's very random, but it's something I do genuinely think about, and it does, mess with your mind a little bit
It's a
when you're
trap.
trying to be focusing. Yeah,
I
and I know.
remember,
Oh, sorry, but I know Zam has talked about it a lot,
mm,
where he's very strong in his mentality, and he always talks about like how a run isn't a run until the very end or whatever.
yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
that's a
it's a
good
quote
point.
he always says. He's like, the run's
Yeah,
not over till it's over, which is a
yeah,
quote I live by. He used to be, I mean, you can look at the Speed Docs video to hear how critical he was of my what if mentality in the early days. I was probably the biggest thing I struggled with, having to overcome that. You get to, Smolg and you're like, there's 4 planets left. Oh, what's gonna happen? How's everyone gonna respond? How is it gonna feel? Am I
yeah,
gonna get pins
exactly.
and needles in my arm again? Like, it's hard to overcome, and I
And nobody's perfect at it.
exactly.
For sure. Like nobody is. I even, Zam. I was watching him like 2 months ago or whatever,
Mm,
and he made the mistake. He ended up admitting it, and then like he grew
mm.
from it. I don't know, but
I mean, everyone's good.
I
It's
look up to
impossible to
him.
entirely shut out those
Yeah,
thoughts.
I look up to his mentality. But
Mm,
even he's not perfect, and that's okay.
mm.
But
I mean,
that's like, yeah. Sorry.
that's why we always say that speedrunning, the same as anything else, you can strive for an ideal, right? And that's what we're always trying to do, get an ideal, but it's impossible to constantly be in that perfect state. Otherwise, you'd be getting PB every run. Like, it would be fine unless there's bad RNG or something, but like you would always get PB if it was easy, right?
Mm.
I mean, that is one of the appeals of speedrunning. It's not easy. So,
I remember seeing a tweet about this one time. It was like people who always say that PB sucks, and it says like it was the best you've ever played. That
yeah.
one's interesting to me because
Mm,
yeah, it is the best you've ever played, but it just doesn't feel good sometimes.
mm.
Anyway, um,
To me, the way I think about this is I am more attached to my average skill level going up, and it might be rooted in what we talked about earlier, where my sum of bests were better, but I was a worse player. Like, I'm happy to
mm,
admit it. When Scotto got that first 23, I had like 20-second, 30-second faster sobs, but he was still a better player, right? Whereas these days, I
yeah,
like to think that I have a much better, consistent time. Like, I feel like without practice, I could boot up my PS2 right now and get a 22, right? Because I've just done so much practice. And that is what I am more excited about these days than raw, how much better am I than I used to be, which is why I'm not as excited for the PB. Like, obviously, you get like the PB, and it's like, oh wow, I played pretty good. But even my current PB, I'm like, it's not perfect. I could definitely go back and improve it for sure, right? And so I'm
mm.
more happy about the fact that my average level, like my averages when I got 20, were like 2130 or something,
I
and I'm
really think for
more excited
me,
about that.
I'll cut you off, but I really think for me, in any percent, I've been able to like tell that I've gotten better, especially in the
Mm.
last week. It's something you can feel in a
Mm.
way, but
Things just start
and
working more often
yeah, exactly,
and you
and
notice it.
I'm able to PB more out of, this one split. If I get to, I don't know, Dovo, I'll just say, I'm able to
Mm.
PB out of that more often than I used to be, which is good. But yeah, I think, yeah, consistency a lot better. Um, and my PB, but I don't know.
I mean, consistency comes in so many weird forms, right? Like, you get it in the forms where, as you said, if I can, everyone's heard it. If I can get out of Dobbo, I reckon I can get world record. There's
Yeah.
that quote. But and then there's obviously um the whole getting through every split consistently, or it's getting through the early game, like whatever it may be. The biggest thing that I always noticed was I knew I got better when I suddenly started getting through what everyone calls the no IMG hell loop pretty much every time, right? Like
Yeah.
within 3 attempts, every single time, I would be out of Whoopash. Not necessarily Whoopash, because not anymore, but like last grind, I would be out of, or into jamming array, right? I'd be out of that hell loop the first couple of splits, which are just so much harder than the rest of the run for a million reasons, and that's a whole topic we don't have time for, but
And it's just a lot nicer to be able to, get runs
mm,
out of that. And a little different, but the same about consistency, where like Scotto, you'd think, okay, the better your PB is, the harder your strats are, the less you're going to PB. But for him, it's the other way around. He
mm,
PBs more often than me, does harder strats, and he's faster. And I think that's a really, strong, like not strong, but it's an easy way to compare your consistency.
mm.
Um, and it's kind of like a tough one as well because I realize like, okay, if he's way faster, why can't I PB as often? But sometimes you got to realize I'm just not as good.
And I think you've also, not necessarily in terms of as good or worse, like relative to your own skill level, going faster inherently means you're more consistent
Yeah,
because you wouldn't have the chance to go quicker if you were failing things, right? Whether it's the smallest thing in the world. So they're sort of, intertwined. I wanna sort of leave on a final sort of question, final sort of thought. Um, do you agree? That's sort of related to this topic. Do you agree with the statement that speedrunning gets more fun the better you get?
yeah, definitely, I agree. Like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, want to unpack it a
Um,
bit?
I remember, I mean, like a few minutes ago, not a few minutes ago, like 20 minutes ago, I said it here, but I don't know, just the worse you are, the more mistakes you do.
Mm,
Mistakes makes you angry. I think that sums it up.
mm. And then the better you
Especially
get, the more
because
golds you get.
yeah, and golds feel good. Um, and also, some splits when you don't learn them properly, you don't feel good completing them. When you don't really know what you're doing. Um,
Mm,
I think for max percent, that was apparent to me because it's such a long category. And when I finally felt like I cracked every single split, that just felt awesome. And
mm.
then I really really enjoyed the game after that.
I also think there's an inherent level of fun that comes with playing at the fastest possible speed, right? Because you do reach a limit, right? Like a lot
Yeah,
of the no IMG com golds on both PS2 and PS3 simply can't be much faster. They might be able to go down like point 0.1, point 0.2, but they are pretty much at the limit with their routes, right? And
yeah.
once you get to that level where you're playing in that speed, and it pretty much becomes a battle of how often you can get through it, that's really fun. I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was. I think that's what kept me in speedrunning as I got
And
better.
then there's splits like for me, Snivel like an NG Plus. They are so much fun, and every single time it varies by like 1 second.
Mm.
Every single time, and that for some reason feels good
Yeah, for
because
sure.
you're just amazed by how you can play the same every single time, get out of it every single time. It's awesome.
Plus, it expands your knowledge, and having knowledge is always fun. For me, I always enjoy guessing at random checkpoints what kind of split time I'm going to get. Like on
Yeah,
Oozler, I might be like 20 seconds in, and I'm like, all right, this is a 44. Or like a 46, rather. I'm thinking of 44 would be a second com gold, but like I'd be like, oh, this is a 46, right? Because I
mm.
know exactly what time I'm going to get based on other things, and that is weirdly satisfying, and that only happens when you're good at the game. Like there
I
are
mean, you
things you
would
just
be
don't
able,
experience.
you would be able to do this too, but like predicting my race laps, I can do that every single time, and my final time. You just know.
I actually can't do that anymore. I
What?
can be within 0.1 every time, but if I was doing IL strats, because I don't race like I do in ILs,
Really?
in runs. No, because
Okay.
obviously I know the 211 route. Um, I don't think it's worth the 0.3 seconds to play that YOLO basically in runs. That's a whole different topic, but that's an
Well,
aspect where I actually can't.
I'm confused about that because I think I remember trying to learn off your IL. Maybe I shouldn't.
Well, that's because I was best at the race when I did the IL.
Yeah. I
But
think my
like
best
it's
race is
not a
like
different route. That's what you got to realize.
okay.
It's just you're a little bit later on the timings to ensure you hit the next one, sort of thing.
Right, right.
Because if you're early on the boost, then you lose the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, I'm so irrelevant, but I'm super angry. I don't have a 211. My best is 212.0.
Keep working it. Keep working it.
God, I've gotten worse at the race. I get
So have I. Everyone
212.2s now.
does. You actually got to
Yeah.
practice the race. It's a shame. But
I
at that
don't.
point, it's
Yeah.
0.3 seconds of improvement. So it's
Yeah.
actually better to practice other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I think that's a great spot to end it off, mate. We've had a very enlightening conversation. I learnt
Awesome.
a lot about you, I must say. I really expected certain answers out of some of these questions, and you threw me some bloody curveballs that I really was
God,
not expecting.
sometimes I feel like I couldn't answer properly, but I'm glad it was good.
Nah, mate. Everything you answered today was fantastic. Now I almost want to get you on again at some point to fucking unpack some of this stuff more, mate. Like that
Yes,
was
part two.
part two coming in whenever the hell I actually have time.
2025.
Let's go. Yeah, for sure. But no, thank you so much for coming on the show, everyone. I'm sure everyone else would have enjoyed that as well. Same as last time, everyone. Please leave some feedback if you want Emeralve back, like I certainly do, and so I'm probably gonna get it back anyway. But if you want him back as well, obviously leave a comment, give us some feedback, give us some more questions. I took like half the questions that are in here from people's DMs or from people's comments, or at least I changed them a little bit, but give us your ideas and I will genuinely try and talk about them. So it's very helpful. But yeah, Amaral, thanks for talking to me today.
It was awesome, no problem.
Thank you, man. And
See
goodbye,
ya.
everybody.